When Anita's parents found out that their daughter had some really strange pets, they were shocked and terrified. But what they did next was a truly unbelievable show of love. Anita had a secret and she wasn't telling anyone. If a single person found out, her top secret friends would be in danger. However, she was 100% sure that no one would find out the truth from her, and not just because she took secrecy very seriously. No, she was trustworthy because she couldn't speak. As she walked into the forest, her mind was racing with anxious thoughts. Anita was worried about her parents' visit. They were due to arrive in 2 days. They would ask her time and time again why she didn't speak and question her grandparents' care. They would tell her she needed to come home to study in a prestigious school and one day inherit her father's business empire because a life in the woods was not a proper dream, but she loathed the idea of going back to Seattle. She thought about how to convince them to let her stay, but her little mind was a muddle. As she walked, she saw 2 deer, rabbits, and birds, but these were not the animals she was looking for. She was waiting for her secret friends to join her. They would know she was in the woods, and soon enough, they would join her. Anita knew she only had to be patient. The first wolf came out of the shadows a short while later. Her head was low and she shook it from side to side in a greeting. Anita was elated and spread her arms to show the wolf how happy she was to see her. Then, 3 more wolves appeared. The younger animals made a fuss of her, sniffing at her jeans and jumping around in crazy circles. Together, the unlikely gang headed deeper into the woods. Anita walked at her usual leisurely pace, observing everything around her. Drinking in the tranquility of the woods. She had befriended the 4 wolves when she was 9. During a walk in the woods, she had stumbled across a wolf cub. Curious and playful, the cub had managed to get itself stuck in a woodchuck burrow. It was crying and struggling to free itself, but to no avail. Eventually, Anita simply pulled the little wolf out, and they became instant friends. Walking through the woods with her best friends was all Anita really wanted from this life. She smiled, not to communicate to anyone, but simply because she could do nothing else. She was happy. 2 days later, Anita's parents arrived, and her life turned upside down. They were rules people, and suddenly, everything had to be just so. In the evening, Grandpa suggested Anita take her parents for a walk in the woods she loved so much. She could teach them about the different birds and show them some of the critters that lived around their home. Initially, the thought didn't excite Anita. The woods were her domain, and she wasn't sure that she wanted to share that with anybody. Least of all her parents. After all, they were city folk. In their home, a spider in a bathtub could cause pandemonium. But the next morning, Anita set off into the woods with her parents in tow. From the outset, it was clear that they were out of their comfort zone. When Anita caught a frog in the rushes next to the stream and brought it over to show her mom and dad, their reaction was predictable. "Put that down, Anita," her mom said sternly. "It's dirty, and you don't know where it's been." Still, she pointed at birds when she saw them, or touched her ear to show her parents to listen to their calls. In her own way, she tried yet again to help them understand why she loved it here so much. Then, it happened. She'd hoped that the wolves would have the common sense not to make an appearance while she was here in the woods with strangers, but they did, and it caused unforeseen havoc. Anita and her parents were in a small clearing when it happened. She had been aware of them for at least 10 minutes before her mother spotted the first wolf. Almost exactly when she started screaming, her father spotted 2 more, and then her mother spotted the 4th. Both parents were now almost hysterical. Anita threw up her hands. She shook her head vigorously and tugged on both their arms. Then she held her finger before her lips and indicated they should all sit down. Neither her mom nor her dad felt comfortable with that. Anita sat down anyway. Then, the first wolf walked out of the shadows, its gaze fixated on Anita's parents. The second appeared from the other side. Next, the last 2 walked into the clearing. Again, with an elaborate movement of her arms and hands, Anita indicated to her parents to sit down. The youngest wolf, the cub Anita had helped from the woodchuck burrow, bounded over to her. He jumped up against her back, tumbled over her shoulder, and ended up in her lap. Her parents made a move to rush to her, but she stopped them with a single finger. Seeing the adult humans were reluctant to take a step, and understanding they wouldn't be a problem for the pack, the adult wolves circled around and simply lay down. It was as if Anita was some great Egyptian pharaoh, and the wolves were her subjects, there to cater to her every whim. That's when Anita said as sternly as she could with her 10-year-old voice, "They're my friends. They won't harm us." Anita's parents were gobsmacked. For a moment, the wolves were forgotten. "Honey, you spoke," her mother said, taking Anita's face in her hands. Some could say this was Anita's second secret. The truth was that she knew perfectly well how to speak, but she simply didn't want to. After all, her true friends didn't need words to understand how she felt or what she wanted, and that's why the woods were the perfect place for her, unlike a bustling, chaotic city like Seattle. Anita desperately hoped that her parents would understand and decide to let her stay with her grandparents. Her father took Anita and her mom in his arms and hugged them both. Without speaking, the little girl showed them to sit down. This time, they did. Then, one after another, the wolves came over to her, nuzzled a bit, and lay down even closer to her than they had been before. That evening, as she was lying in the bath, Anita pricked her ears to listen to the conversation her parents were having with her grandparents. She spoke, her father said, shaking his head. "Did you know she hangs around with wolves in the woods?" Her mother asked in an accusatory tone. Her grandfather answered first. "That child speaks to the animals with her heart," he said. "She doesn't need words. There's not a creature in the woods around here that will harm her. She befriended a pack of wolves. So what? They're wild animals," her father said. "Predators. There's no telling what they will do from one moment to the next." "That's where you're wrong," Anita's grandmother said. To Anita, the wild creatures are as predictable as your first cup of coffee in Seattle every morning. She understands them, and they understand her. It is something to be celebrated. "And why do you think she spoke?" her grandfather asked, lifting an eyebrow. "It's the magic of the woods and the wild things that live there. This is Anita's home. There's no pressure on her there. No one tells her she needs to speak or act in a certain way." Anita's father seemed to soften a little. "I just want to know if she's safe. The woods can be dangerous, and now with the wolves." Her grandfather smiled gently. She is safer in these woods than she could ever be in the city, he said softly, and remember, if you're ever worried, think of the wolves as her bodyguards. Bodyguards, her father said pensively. I guess that's actually what they look like, her bodyguards. The following day, Anita's parents told her that they would be going home to Seattle alone. They understood that the woods were her place and would never want to separate her from her true friends. However, they also made her an unbelievable promise. They would come back to visit every weekend and follow her into the woods to bond with the wolf pack as well. If they were her family, then they would love them just as much. And if, one day, she chose to quit school and become a park ranger, they would support her dreams, but most importantly, they would never pressure her to speak again. She had shown them that love doesn't need words, and that the ones who really love us know what we're thinking simply by looking into our eyes. What a beautiful story. How would you react if you discovered your child hangs out with wolves? Tell us in the comments below. For now though, that's it. Catch you in the next video.